And finally, build a community. No one does big things by themselves.
Hi, I'm Alexa. Would you like to air party? Let's use internet like a phone, not like library. Bring people together behind their screens. Let's stop being the center of the circle. Be the circle.
Rosie, thank you. And I will ask you the main question. Is there a community behind each indie project for you?
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Yeah.
I think. Do you mean indie projects in general, like for any indie
Yeah.
hackers? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think in the world today, it's like community is like all of it's not mandatory, and I think everybody seems to want community, but they don't have a real reason to have one, and a lot of people think just like having a list or broadcasting, having an audience as a community. But for me, there's very much like a big difference between an audience and a community, um, and I don't think a lot of people quite seem to understand that. And there's a lot of talk I see, at least on indie hackers, is like people wanting to start a community, whereas they shouldn't be, because really, there just isn't always a need for community. Um, So it's like, it's an in thing now, I think. I think everybody wants a community because they see how valuable a community can be, but they're probably not willing to put in the actual work to create what a real community is.
Yeah, okay. So it's going to be a pretty generic question, but I really would be very happy if Rosie could elaborate about what she previously told. Everybody here today, well, most of the people we know says that they want to build communities when really most of them want to build audiences. And I really be very happy if Rosie could detail the key differences that she observes between what an audience is and what define a community from her point of view.
Yeah, sure. So for me, the main difference is an audience is kind of based around the founder or founders of the audience, or what they might call community. So they typically, they might do good things, but at the end of the day, it's mostly about them and raising their voices and putting money in their pockets and making them advance more than any, their audience. Um, Whereas with community, it's all about kind of sharing the load and sharing the rewards, in whatever way that might be. And that doesn't mean to say that it's like sharing the profits. It's just like, kind of respecting the community and giving back in ways that you can give back. And so, like, for example, at Ministry of Testing that I founded, I used to do this by um, like, we used to do events. I always used to pay all the speakers' travel expenses. I never did keynotes. I just did. Everyone who came had all their travel expenses covered, as a way to kind of like respect the speakers and make it like an equal playing field. Um, I always used to look out for new voices to try to raise their voices and lift up the community that way. Um, so things like that, and it was never about me. It was, I wasn't the one getting up on stage trying to say, look how clever I am. I actually never ever in my like 13 years of or 10 years of running conferences, I never got up on stage to speak, because I didn't feel like it was my role to do that. Um, Whereas, like, if you're building an audience, typically, the people who build an audience want that. They want to get up there and they want to speak. They want to profit as much as possible. They want to own everything and they want to control everything. Um, so that for me is the main difference. But also, I think you kind of have to. build a bit of an audience to start a community, because you kind of, it's really hard to start a community without anyone knowing who you are. So you kind of have to develop some kind of audience or some kind of trust with people to be able to start a community.
It's a lovely answer, and that's very funny because I know a lot of people who built such things as communities, and most of them actually are pretty introvert and shy and not wanting at all to go into the spotlight, exactly like you defined. So it seems like to be a pretty common trait. And how did you happen to end up into community building as a person who's not particularly in need to shine or just to talk or to just to speak on stage? How did yourself decided to like commit into these tribe building efforts, and how did you ended up specializing yourself into such things as community building, if I can ask?
Yeah, so I've been in tech for like 20 years now. Um, I, I don't have any qualifications, but like when I was 20 or 19, I just got my first job in tech. Um, and then that was like around 2000, 2001. And then like I did that for a while, and then like the internet was getting quite, obviously it was still quite new at the time, but it was getting quite interesting. But then around like 2007, it was like Web 2.0, um, and there was some like really interesting things that were going on. And I went to a web conference, which was like a web design type conference in my hometown, and I was quite inspired to see that. And there were a few meetups going on as well. Um, and so I think my first community thing that I ever did is that I decided to start a local meetup group. I'd never done it before, but I kind of like jumped on the idea that there was a meetup group in London called Girl Geek Dinners. And I decided to do one in my hometown, Brighton, which isn't far from London. Um, so I did that, and it just really took off. It was really popular for like 2 years. Like once a month, we would like meet up. It was free, but it was always fully booked out. It was just focused on women, and that was just like my first chance of like building a community, and it was amazing because again, I had no experience doing it, but I just kind of dived into it, and at the same time, I was a tester at the time, but I was kind of learning about marketing. I was reading a lot of Seth Godin. Um, he's actually one of the people that kind of inspired me to like go deeper into community building.
Here I can
He's quite
definitely relate.
yeah. So he was a big inspiration for me, and like everything he said kind of made sense to me, and I just looked to kind of experiment with doing things, and that meetup kind of gave me the confidence to do that. Around the same time, I started a software testing club, which became Ministry of Testing, and that was just like a really slow burner thing where I used Ning, which is still around, which is just like a hosted forum, to kick that off. But I had a bit of a audience, a little bit of a reputation in testing, so that was what got me started. And also at the same time, I was really inspired by the like co-working movement, and I co-started a co-working space, and I did that for about 3 years. That was like 2008 to or 2009 to 2010 or 11, around those times. So it was like before co-working was really popular. But again, that was like an amazing experience, and I really managed to like pull people together, and like everybody knew who I was, and we used to do like these monthly meetups at the end of the month, and I just have great memories of it. But the co-working space didn't work out, mostly down to like business relationships. I wasn't enjoying who I was doing it with, so I just stopped doing that. But I still dream of starting another one at some point, but I'm not quite there yet. I kind of want to do like a family based one, but or family friendly one, but because I've got a few kids. But yeah, and then like as I was doing the co-working stuff, then my ministry of testing stuff was growing along the side as well. So it's like I had a few things going on at the same time, which is typically what I do.
This is Aurélien. I may have a complementary question to what you were saying. So my question is, as you started doing all this from A to Z somehow, at what point did you start really to strategize what you were doing? I feel like you started along the flow based on your passions and your interests. At what point did it really happen that you were actually feeling that something was going on, maybe something more long term, and that you started, yeah, put a strategy in front of it?
Yeah, so like the meetups that I did, like the Girl Geek meetups, never made any money. The co-working thing I did for like 2 or 3 years, I never made any money from it. Um, so it's like, there's a big learning curve going on there. Ministry of Testing, I started that in 2007, just as like I didn't really think it would go anywhere, but over the years it kind of grew and grew, and people were enjoying it. And um, it was actually in like 2010, 2011 that I said to myself that this has taken up a lot of my time. It has to make money, or I'm just not going to do it. So that's kind of like you know, uh, just like a point in my life where I had made a promise to myself that I had to make money, because otherwise it would just suck my life away and I would never be able to make a living. Um, so with Ministry of Testing, that's when I started doing conferences for my community. So we did conferences and training events, and we started with one event. So it was like an annual conference, and that worked. We got like 60, 70 people showing up, and so we did the same again the following year. Like the first year it made like a very small amount of money. The second year it started kind of just like every year I would make some more money. By the third year I was making like a reasonable income. By the fourth and fifth year I had people coming to me saying I want to do this in my hometown or in my city or in my country. So it quite quickly, like I think the first conference was 2012. Then I can't remember exact years, but probably like 2016 we did one in Manchester and then New York, and then after that we did Netherlands and we did Germany, then we did Philadelphia and San Francisco, and then Australia, and then New Zealand. So it started like spreading. But I also used that as like a basis. Like we had recorded all the talks from all the conferences, so that was something that became like a membership model where people would have to sign up to pay for access to the videos. Um, and now during COVID, that's kind of that's like our model now, is that we've had to ditch events um, and just move completely online, and hopefully we're well placed for that. With all we've invested in for the past 5 years or so in the tech, slowly building it up, kind of self building a lot of the stuff.
Rosie,
But yeah.
my project is about developing a community dedicated to BAME founders in VC in France and Europe in second, like in the UK or in Germany. Here, for instance, BAME means Black, Asian, and other minority ethnics. And so the goals of this community is just to connect peoples of the community, help each other about the project for another member, and also do recommendation to each other about the recruitment or startup or fundraising advices. It's about creating a good spirit of helping each other, if you to be short. So I have a few questions about that. The first one is about I want before creating the company, do I need to content to promote me or and the future community like webinars, or could I implement the community from day one?
I would start with the community from day one and see if you can make it work. I think when people start a community, they have a vision of what it can be or what they want it to be. But then as they start trying things out, things change. You know, it might be that some things go better than you expect, or some things just don't work. So for me, it's like, don't, unless you really have to like formalize anything, avoid doing that as much as possible and until you have to. So it's like, if you don't need a company, don't set up a company. Yeah. If you don't need software, don't use software. If you don't need some fancy forum tool, don't use any of that. It's like start with the basics and like build up. And community at the end of the day is based on people. It's not based on technology. Technology just helps it. Um, and it's the relationships that matter at the end of the day. It's the conversations that happen that create the community. So I would always kind of recommend just starting as small as you can, and trying your best to make decisions as you go, and not to like give yourself a hard time if things don't go well. Because I think that's like an easy trap to get into. Is like you can easily look around you and think that other people are succeeding, but in reality, it's sometimes years in the making before people start to gain traction. But all that you see is the traction happening. You don't see like the hard work that has kind of gone into all the work of building the actual community.
Okay, thanks for the advice. Um, So I think that my other question is not relevant now because you answer you give me the answer before. It is about what is the best tool for building a community, because we are community in several tools like Slack, maybe another one. So I thought that for you is the tools is not important, or there are kind of tools for kind of communities.
Yeah, there's so many tools at the moment. So I've got a website. I've been as part of my learning process of the past year. So basically, I've been building communities for a long time, but I had my head stuck down in Ministry of Testing and not like researching what were the latest tools out there. So when I stepped back from Ministry of Testing, I decided to like dedicate some time to researching like the community world, to see who was writing about what, see what tools are out there. I've been doing it for months, and I just keep coming across new tools all the time. Um, and for me, the problem is, say, when I choose to use a tool, it's a big, especially like if it's if it's a tool that's kind of integrated into the workflow of the members. So if I choose a tool, I don't want to have to change it for quite a long time, because it's a lot of work to change, either technology wise or for the people who are involved with it. So it's like when you choose something, you want to stick with it. And there's a lot of tools out there, and there's a lot of new ones coming out. Some of them look all right. Some of it's like Circle, for example, is quite a new one. A lot of people seem to be adopting that. But for me, the problem is you don't. If they're new tools, you don't really know where they're heading and how well it's going to support your community. Especially like with as much as I support indie hackers and tools that they're building, I struggle personally to invest in a community tool if I don't have confidence that they're going to be around in 5 or 10 years, and if they're going to be like investing in the kind of technology behind it. So how do I know that it will grow with me in the way that I want it to grow? It's it's such a hard thing. But also at the same time, it's just like there's a whole no code movement, and that's cool as well. Um, but it's like it's I think it's a difficult one with communities, and I have been thinking about it a lot recently, but I don't know what the right answer is. But it's like when I think about, like, I've been thinking about starting a community, um, and I don't know what to choose. Personally, I'm still like I'm super reluctant to choose most of the tools that are out there, and a lot of that reluctance is just because I don't know what my community will end up being. So it's like how can I choose a tool? Um, but there's plenty of tools that will get the job done. Slack is one of them, Circle is another, Discourse is another, but yeah, it's a hard one. And that is a big part. It's like you definitely should use tools that your community are familiar with, or there's no point like pushing tools on that they'll never end up using. Um, but also, is that things like Telegram, is like once a Telegram group gets quite busy, then it gets hard to manage or cope with the information that's coming in. So it's like these things are uh, it's just it's a really hard thing. And I think personally it's just like keep things as simple as possible. um for me, it's like keep an email list or a Substack for as long as you can. Substack has some quite nice community threads and features.
I've been using, I launched my Substack. It was around like 5 weeks ago in French. And I actually launched an English version 2 weeks ago because I had people asking me for the English version. And I actually had like people, that were telling me they were translating it in English. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting. So I launched the English version, and I've got this Telegram account. Why did I go on Telegram? It was actually because I wanted a tool that was different from others, and I use WhatsApp for like friends and family, so I didn't want to use it for my community. I wanted something that was like kind of separate, and I actually like Telegram once you get it, because you've got this channel, and when you're on the channel, you can only broadcast and people can't answer, but you can like link to a chat. So this is actually pretty smart, because the problem is that sometimes you've got people that subscribe to a community and just want to read, like lurkers, and then you've got ones that want to comment. But the problem is, if you've got people commenting, then the other ones feel like they're drowning, because they haven't, let's say, come to the chat for like 2 days, and then they come back and they've got like 120 like messages, and it's like, okay, I'm drowning in it, and then people unsubscribe. So the good thing about Telegram, at least that way, is that people that don't want to chat and just want the information stay on the main channel, and the other ones that actually want to discuss go on the other one. And then sometimes you can go on the chat and come back on the channel. So I mean, I like the idea. It's not very, like, the user experience when you don't understand it at first is not that simple, because like, since the messages are published at the same time on the channel and on the chat, someone that is on both has it twice. So I had people telling me, well, it's weird, isn't it? But once you get the idea behind it, and you can archive like the main channel and just keep the chat, or the other way around, then it's actually pretty smooth. And I've so far I have like 105 subscribers, and none of them have unsubscribed. So I think it works pretty well. And I think it's also a way of like knowing which are like your power like users, or like big fans, because on the channel I've got 105 subscribers, and on the chat I've got maybe 36 or 37, and those are the most active, and I know those are the people, if I ask questions, if I want to interact with them, I know they will reply. So it's actually interesting. I mean, Telegram is an interesting example.
Sure.
I'll just I had a question for you, Rosie. So I'm a big fan of your website and
Thank
your
you.
Notion, and it's like there's so much information in there. It's really really interesting. I'm still kind of digging and reading all of it. but like one question, it's like if you were to give us like the best three advices
Uh,
you had, like what would it
yeah.
be? For community
I
building.
think, yeah. To me, it's like I still feel like I'm learning about community building. So for me, how I approach it is just being human, and it sounds really basic, and almost like stupid, um, but and I think of like being human, like more like perhaps in the traditional kind of way, is like trying to think back to the roots of like humanity. Is like, to me, I'm not really an expert in that, but I go with my gut feeling is that community is so important to us as humans. It's like, to survive, we need each other, and um, and that actually, like when I was going through my journey of learning about communities, like around 2007 to 2010, I got quite into like social entrepreneurship, and that kind of really inspired me. It's like doing, businesses that were trying to do good things and make money, and that kind of like stuck with me a lot throughout my journey. So it's like, um, community, basically, taking that into mind is like, I really wanted to build community, but I knew for me personally, I had to make it sustainable, um, in a financial way for me, and nobody seemed to be kind of talking much about that. It was like, well, either you do social good stuff, or you go where the money is, for you sell your soul or something like that. And I kind of really struggle with that, because I want to make decent money, not just because I want money, but because it's like I want to be paid enough, and I want to be able to do good things with the money that I make without necessarily being a charity. Um, and so I think for me, a lot of my, basically, long story short, a lot of my community focus has been on how can I do good in the work that I'm doing, whilst also making money and looking after myself as a person. Um, so it's like, how can I help the people around me? How can I raise their voices? How can I shout about them as much as possible? Or how can, if I lift them up, um, uh, then we're all gonna kind of be lifted up. Um, and it's like, and kind of like having the trust that that's that will, in the long term, kind of bring value, or bring growth, or whatever way you want to look at it. But um, so yeah, basically, instead of thinking of what can be done for me, is like what can be done for the people. And if you do good things for people, they'll always remember you. It's the old classic saying of, people will always remember how you make them feel, but they won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you make them feel. So it's like, my everything I do is that I want to make people feel good. Um, and like, as an example, at Indie Hackers, I do this a lot, with Twitter. I will find what people are saying on Indie Hackers, and I will shout them out on Twitter. I will promote their products. I will retweet their stuff. I will start conversations that will help people. I will ask questions, and that's all about lifting people up. And I think people really, really notice that. Um, and with Ministry of Testing, I did that by really focusing on speakers and new voices. I lifted up a whole industry there just by uh, focusing on people who never had a voice, who never got listened to. And because I was in the community constantly, I would see interesting things, and I could see like little sparks, little bits of light in them, and I would just approach them and talk to them and say, you should do this, you should do that. And quite you could speak to a lot of testers, and a lot of them will say that the first time they ever publicly spoke was through Ministry of Testing, and that they never would have had the courage to do that if I hadn't like approached them at the beginning. So that's kind of a not very precise answer, but I think the basis of it is do good for people, and it will kind of return back to you.
I want to talk about growth hacking. I feel I do not feel comfortable at all as soon as we mention this discipline. May we call that a discipline? I'm not sure. Um, how do you balance? Because I'm going to share concrete examples. You see where I'm heading at. So I was aggressively followed and unfollowed by the co-founder of a pretty famous um, startup accelerator or incubator here in Paris. And I started engaging with the guy and say, well, the guy had something like 13K followers in sort of a community, I think. And I was like, yeah, why are you doing this? I mean, your incubator is famous and you seem to have quite a trendy profile. So why would you do that? And he just answered me, well, when you want to build a community, you can't count on organic growth, and it doesn't go quick enough for me. So I can't wait that much. I don't want to wait that much. So I need to do some follow. And I know this strategy was not the only growth hacking thing he was doing. So I'm sure, and I of course there is a big issue with reputation because I found it somehow a little bit ridiculous, and I don't want to follow the guy anymore, of course. But um, do you understand why people are making somehow, I don't want to judge here, but this mistake of being too aggressive? And did you ever consider or try this type of mechanism,
Yeah,
or are you totally against the idea, or
I've always been against it. I never understand that approach. Um, it's just it's sad. It's really sad, and I think because maybe you can have empathy with the people because maybe they're under pressure to achieve certain goals and certain stats, but at the end of the day, it's fake growth, right? It's not real. It's like people trying to make their numbers look good, but the real engagement isn't there, and um, you can't really hide that kind of stuff. It's like there's so many Twitter accounts out there that don't have engagement. They might have a lot of followers, but there's not really much connection between the Twitter person and the followers. So it's like, what's the point? There's just like no point doing that. Um, so it's like, yeah, growth hacking. I don't like the term. I've never uh, in I've never enjoyed it. I have read about it a lot, and I do enjoy kind of reading about it in the sense of I'm interested to see what kind of tactics people are using to grow, because that helps me learn as a community person what people are doing, and it helps me choose whether I want to do some of their things or not. Most of the time, it's like no, I won't bother, and most of the time, my decisions are based on doing the right thing, um, and not obsessing over numbers. And so, like with ministry of testing, I never really paid attention to the numbers, um, but I was very motivated. I guess the only numbers that I was very motivated to achieve was to get a certain amount of people signed up to the events that we were doing, because those numbers mattered, um, not just from a financial perspective, but I believe to create a good event, you needed a certain amount of people. So I was personally motivated to ensure that X amount of people would, you know, attend an event. Otherwise, it would affect the experience of the people that were there. And sometimes that meant me giving away tickets, and I was okay with that. Sometimes it meant, like giving scholarships away, or just, doing competitions, or, trying to do good things to get the numbers in. But yeah, never sneaky tactics. I think it's fake, basically, and it doesn't really help growth from a community perspective. It can help businesses grow, but when you're thinking of community, I don't believe in it. And it's been really interesting doing the work at Indie Hackers because there's a lot of similarities with Ministry of Testing, but some things are different. But again, all the growth there has been completely organic. So it's like we just focus on trying to do the best things we can and trying to advance the industry. Like for Indie Hackers, I'm basically told that everything we do is to make the indie hacking world better. If what you're doing is not helping us achieve that goal, then there's probably no point doing it. But we do have targets to hit, kind of. We have kind of loose targets of growing our emails and growing our audience, but we're not using any fake tactics to make that happen. We're very much focused on trying to do it in the best possible way we can. On the Indie Hackers website, it says Indie Hacker is a person building an online project that can generate revenue, or a person seeking financial independence, creative freedom, and the ability to work on their own schedule. So if you go to indiehackers.com/start, you can read that definition. To me, indie hackers are basically, lots of people refer them to it as bootstrappers, founders, independent founders who are looking to build sustainable, profitable businesses in normally, a good and ethical way. Yeah, that's what indie hackers is. How can they become an indie hacker? Anyone can become an indie hacker. You have the thing with, I think, creating a business is that it's really broad and it's really hard to define
Also, there might be,
what
maybe I
a
just
business person is
mentioned a
these days.
subtopic.
And I think, especially if we take
Sorry,
like Substack or
yeah,
newsletters
I
as
think
an
I sort of
example, is like you can be an indie hacker
confused,
with
maybe
just a
not confused, but
newsletter,
there is
and you
difference
can
between audience,
turn
pure
newsletters
audience building,
into a profitable
and
business.
community building, which
Or
is
you
now
can look
understanding
to
to be
perhaps
two different
create
things somehow.
something
So,
more than that, or
anyways,
create
thanks, Rosie. That was
a
a clear
SaaS
answer. Thank you for that.
product or an info product. There's it could be anything. It doesn't have to be like just for online stuff, but basically making money with ideally the help of the internet, because everything these days relies on the internet to kind of make things happen. Um, and and to become an indie hacker, you just got to start, and it sounds pretty cheesy, but you got to start somewhere with an idea of something, and follow that journey and see where it leads you. So you say quite often people start with an idea. Sometimes people start with a problem. Often those things go hand in hand. But the basis is are you serving a market? Are you addressing a problem that someone is willing to pay for? And it's hard sometimes. Sometimes people get it on the first shot, and other times people are trying after 1, 2, 3 years to make it happen. It's not necessarily an easy journey. When I started my business, I would class myself as an indie hacker when I started it, before the term was actually made up. But I spent 3, 4, 5 years before I actually made any money. So anyone can do it, and personally, I would encourage anyone to do it. I think it's a way forward, and the future to be able for people to live independently and follow the interests that they have. And it's not always fun working for other people. But I work for indie hackers right now, and I'm quite enjoying it. So, it's okay to work for other people as well sometimes. No problem. Yeah.
A couple of questions. First one, pretty short one. In the hacker, I haven't noticed it's premium based or registration based or things like this. So I would like to ask you if you have any revenue model in your head, just if you predict any growth. I mean, how can you generate enough revenue in order to sustain what seems to be an ever growing community? And so that's the first question. Well, okay, let's answer the first question. I will have the second one after because it's pretty longer.
Yeah, sure. So Indie Hackers was started by Cortland 4 or 5 years ago now. And about 9 months after it started, it got acquired by Stripe. So it doesn't have to make any money. I think that definitely changes the dynamic of the community. We don't have to sell stuff. We don't have to spend time selling stuff. We don't have to think up of products to sell. We don't have to have advertising. And at the same time, I think Stripe has done it quite well as well. It's like they don't, they support it. And they're quite lean with it. We're still a very small team. It's mostly just me, Cortland, and Channing full time, and there's a few freelancers who help out. So yeah, it's quite lean, but they don't, they don't really push stuff. So I've been there 18 months, and I've never had to push the Stripe brand.
Yeah.
They just literally want to do
Yeah, no, I
really
see.
positive things. So it's quite cool.
It's very clever from them. Yeah, so you are building a community of people who launch business, and so sooner or later they can just think about Stripe as a payment solution. So it's like a nurturing content and community-based accelerator for business creators who might use a payment solution in the future. So it's a long bet,
Yeah.
a long investment, but that's very clever from them.
Yeah.
My second question may be a bit more complex. I see around me tons of people who launch community effort-based things such as book or things just when they want to people contribute and build together things. And I've been fortunate enough to be invited into such communities. But what I discovered, and I had the problem myself when trying to build communities, is people are very enthusiastic at the beginning, but after a moment, it's just the retention is really a key issue. So far, the best experiment I had with a WhatsApp group, which is now like 300 people, communicating on a daily basis and sharing examples, and I'm just intervening once a week. And it's just how do you manage? I mean, especially with web-based community, with complex things such as forums or things like this, with indie hackers, for example. How do you manage to people to remember to log in on a daily basis or a weekly basis? How do you manage to people to think back about the community and don't forget to come back on a regular basis? Do you have any tips that you appreciate that you might want to share with us?
Oh, it's hard. It's definitely a hard one to try to pull people back in. I think it's the biggest challenges of community building is that you're constantly, trying to bring value. And I think personally that at the end of the day, you have to have something that people want, that they feel is valuable. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what that value is. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, and I think it comes down to putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's like, why would they come back and spend time with you? People have 24 hours in a day. They have to sleep 8 hours on average. They have to work. They probably have family to take care of. Why should they spend time in your community? And I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that you should be asking when you're building a community. And if you can't answer that, then that's probably a bit of a problem, I guess. And in communities, it's hard to. I still struggle doing that. It's hard to sometimes talk about the value that you do offer. Um, yeah, it's challenging. So it's like I think part of it is probably value based and belonging based. So it's like they need to feel like there's value there, and they need to feel like they belong, and they kind of
But
go.
you, for example, you're a good example. Within the hackers, there are probably plenty of people who come on the page in order to search for tools or advices, just for specific needs, or is they fortunate enough, thanks to a Google search, to identify you and even create an account for a while. But how do you manage to involve people into this, like build it publicly stuff and exchange advices with others and belong to circle of discussions?
Yeah.
Do you have like a way to make people more and more invested into it? Just do you have anything like a journey or something like this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things going on. So, like, Indie Hackers is custom built, which I think more communities need to do, especially as they have potential and they get bigger. It's like not to jump out and just use a tool that's off the shelf. So obviously there's disadvantages of that, but the advantages that I see are quite amazing in the fact that the journey is customized. So there's an onboarding journey that Cortland has created, which is pretty nice. It's like when people sign up, they get uh, there's like an onboarding flow. It has a few steps. They get a welcome message from me on the forum, and they're encouraged to participate um, as they sign up, because like that's we believe that if they like leave a comment when signing up, then they probably have a higher chance of coming back. Or people might leave a comment on their comment, and then they'll get a notification, and that will help them kind of come back as well. There's other things like emails. There's probably, I don't know, like 8 types of emails that they can subscribe to. A lot of them are kind of automated. So a lot of it is based on the content that the community creates. So there's milestones. So there's a daily milestone email that goes out, like the top 3 or 5 milestones get emailed out if you're subscribed to that list. You can get emails from people that you follow, things like that. So it kind of reminds people to come back. There's the podcast again, which is quite popular, and that reminds people to come back. There's interviews that yeah, I mean, I'm personally doing some meetups, but even before I was doing them, there were meetups across the globe that people were organizing themselves, all volunteer led. Um, then there's things like the Twitter that I do. So I try to elevate voices on Twitter. So that also pulls people into the actual community. So it's like trying to and figure out what works. And I think it's all of those things together. Quite often it's like you kind of need like a bit of a flywheel effect. You need this like loop that goes round. It's like, so someone makes a post. So how can we,
Yeah.
elevate that post, or, spread the post? And one way is email, another way is Twitter. And, how can you talk about people? Is that if you talk about people, then those people that you're talking about will naturally come and see what you're saying
Sure.
about them, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, very understandable, very basic stuff. But yeah, no, not used enough, of course. And the combination of means is pretty intelligent as well. Just the fact to have several means in order to be remembered by people is probably much more efficient than trying to build the perfect feedback loop or the perfect loop. Thank you very much for your advices.
No problem.
My question is about super user. For me, at the beginning of my project, do you think that I need to promote a kind of super user to help me develop the community, or do I need to do all the work by myself?
I always rely on me and only me to make things happen, especially in the beginning. Um, it doesn't mean that you can't
Okay.
seek help, but relying on anybody in the early days is not a good thing. Um, you have to kind of expect to do most of the work yourself, and expect people just not to be reliable and not to last. Um, and it just I think if you have realistic expectations, then it kind of makes it easier to kind of have a long-term vision. Is that you as a founder are responsible for the community. No one else is going to have that attachment to the community like you are, and you can't expect other people to, unless they're co-founders maybe. But so you have to put in the hard work, and people have lives, and all sorts of stuff happens. So it's like I would definitely like build up strong relationships and look for support from people and look for people that believe in what you're doing. Um, but I think also you need to respect who these people are, um, and give back to them in any way that you can. And that doesn't always mean money, but sometimes it can mean money. But so how can you give back to these people and support these people so that when they need to support a community like yours, they'll support your community and not someone else's.
Okay, Rosie, thanks. I have a question for you.
Okay. Thanks
Let's say in 2 years,
for the answer.
there are a lot of successful indie projects and indie creators, and let's say the people behind this project make profitable revenues. Maybe some of these creators will thrive together, like they thrive on indie hackers right now, but maybe they will thrive together in a micro community, vertical micro community about sport, about entertainment, I don't know. So how do you see the future, and how corporate role could give a push to these new creators in the future? Even how could the investment world could help indie creators? Because we think it's not possible because of the bootstrap thing, but maybe there is a future about that. What do you think, Rosie?
I don't know. I'm not big into I've never liked the corporate world, um, and I wish more of them would do the right thing. Um, and I think about this sometimes and say, and I think about Stripe, and I think Stripe do, obviously have biases, but I honestly think Stripe do some really positive things. Um, so without sounding like too cheesy, it's like, why can't more companies be like Stripe and do positive things and hire the best kind of people to make an impact. I'd love the world to be like that, but I can't see it happening. Um, yeah, wishful thinking. But it's like if Stripe's doing it, maybe that will start a trend. Maybe other companies will take note and follow suit. Um, but even so, it's like indie hackers can follow good values as well. So it's like we can all strive to live in a better world. We can all strive to make good money, and we can all choose what to do with that money and choose better ways to spend it. I think. Um, so that's how I like to think. It's like personally, I'm very motivated. I'm very motivated to like make money, but what motivates me is what I can end up doing with that money, and what I can make happen. So that's what excites me. It's not about like buying more stuff. It's just like I can make a change to people's lives if I make more money.
And do you mind if I ask a really last one?
Go on.
I have to ask it, Rosie. Yeah, I don't want to let you go, Rosie. This is really interesting to me. I feel like a newbie, but thanks for all this.
That's all right.
My last question would be, I think it's going to be an easy one. Um, would you tell us who are your, let's say, role models in the domain of community building, the people you admire for either their success or the way they strived for the good reasons to build cool communities? If you have like two or three of them to share with us, that would be maybe good references for us to investigate.
Yeah. So for me, because I started like going back like 2007-ish, and then I didn't really read a lot after like 2010, like specifically related to communities. So these days I feel like I'm catching up on like some of the books and stuff that are out there. Um, at the moment, I like Peter Block. I've been reading his book and I find it quite inspiring. It's a bit intense. I feel like I have to read it slowly. So I think, that's really interesting for me. I get a lot of inspiration from that. In the early days,
Could you give us the title of the book?
I think it's The Structure of Belonging. I like Priya Parker. I think her book recently was quite good. I can't remember what it's called. T- yeah, if you search Priya Parker book,
We'll find on Rosieland.
yeah, it will definitely be there. The Art of Gathering. That's it. So yeah, that was, I quite enjoyed that. But in the early days, it was Seth Godin for me, even though it was more marketing kind of related rather than strictly community building. And one that people don't talk about, I'm actually doing a talk next week for hers, is Tara Hunt. She actually wrote a book called The Woofie Factor, and that's all kind of based on like social capital, doing things for woofie, she would call it. So she's been around, and she was part of the co-working scene, back in the day as well. And then on top of that, I would say Alex Hillman, just because he's again I did co-working, and he's very much been into communities for quite a long time, and he has some good thoughts about communities in general.
You have just listened to our last Fireside conversation with Rosie Cherry. If you're working on a side project and looking to be self-independent, we strongly recommend you to watch indiehackers.com.